session, we are going to learn about the research methodology and research methods. So let's have an introduction about research. So research refers a careful investigation of a particular event, concern, or any of the research problems using the various scientific methods. One of the popular or the famous sociologist L. Norman Barbie, who defined the research as a systematic inquiry to describe, to explain, to predict, and control the observed phenomenon that's called research. And according to him, research includes both methods, inductive method and deductive method. Inductive method refers to build a new theory about any process or the phenomenon. But deductive method is to test that theory whether it is applicable, whether it is approachable to any of the issues or concern or event. That's called deductive method or approach. So, deductive methods analyze the observed event, and accordingly, the researcher will try to build up a new theory based on the observation, based on the investigation, etc. While deductive methods verify the observed event, and then the researcher will decide whether the theory would be applicable, would be approachable to such observed event or not. And that's called deductive method or approach. So inductive approaches are associated with the qualitative method, which are more subjective in nature, where the deductive methods are more commonly associated with the quantitative analysis, where more in numbers, where more the hypothetical testing would take place. And that's called all over research. Research is conducted with various purposes. The first one is to identify the potential and the new customers, to understand the existing customers, to set the pragmatic goals, very specific goals related to a very specific problems. Next, to develop a productive market strategies where the strategy is not related to market and of course related to any of the specialization or areas where the researcher work under research is to develop the productive strategies. Next is to address the business challenges, and of course research is also being conducted what would be the major or the minor challenges faced by the organization and in the market. That is, a researcher aim to address the challenges in the open environment. Next is to put together a business expansion plan. So any of the new business expansion plan to be conducted by various organization or within the organization, that to be the research will put together all, and then accordingly they will build up a specific business expansion plan for the organization. Next is to identify the new business opportunities. So of course, when the research is to be conducted, the aim, one of the aim of such concept is also to identify the new business opportunities within the you can say market perspective or any other perspective or research perspective, etc. For example, a study focused on finding the ways to increase student involvement in the classroom. Or in another example, we could take up under research is developing a new treatment for insomnia. So when we talk about developing a new treatment, developing a new theory, it refers to an inductive method. And the first example, that is a study focused on finding the ways, that means we are finding the ways and testing the ways whether it would increase the student involvement in the classroom or not. In this particular example, we can apply a deductive approach under this case. Now we can come up to the more purposes, that is the main purpose of research, that is exploratory. So when as we can talk, as the name suggests, researchers conduct exploratory studies just to explore a group of research questions, and the answers or whatever the analysts, the researchers do may not offer us you can say meaningful conclusion to the perceived problem or to the research problem, and the researcher will undertake to handle a new problem areas which has not been explored before, and that exactly called exploratory research. Next one is descriptive research. The major focus of this type of research is to expand your knowledge into you can say into your current areas or current issues through through following a process of data collection or using its methods to collect the data from the various respondents. Descriptive research describes the behavior of a sample population. Only the one of variables could be studied by the researcher. It could be studied two or more variables according to the specific study of the researcher. Let's take an example to understand this purpose of research. A study was conducted to determine if top level management leaders in the 21st century possess the moral right to receive the considerable sum of money from the company profit or not. So this is a case which has been mentioned, and researchers try to give a description about this. You can see case whether the particular leaders must have a moral right to receive a considerable sum of amount from the company profit or not. And when the particular researcher give a description of the above case related to the management areas or related to any other finance areas, that's become a descriptive research. So it is very important that in this particular case, the researcher is trying to find out the issues, and that issue will be considered to you can say will be considered to research, and accordingly they will describe the whole scenario, including the issues, including the recommendations, including the reviews that they will collected from the you can say respondents, and accordingly the overall description of the case is to be given by the researcher. Next one is explanatory. Explanatory, in other words, we can call a casual research, which is, and such research is conducted to understand what would be the impact of any of the specific changes in the existing standard policies or procedures. So, if any experiment is to be done by the researcher and they are using the existing procedures, then this research would be helpful, because this research would always try to assess the impact of the specific changes which could be made in the existing procedures in the research by the researcher, and that's become the explanatory research, that why such changes which is need to be done, what would be the impact of the existing procedures in the particular experiment. So running experiment is one of the most common form where such researches will be used. And for example, a study was conducted if, to understand the effect of rebranding on the customer loyalty. So whatever the existing, you can say brands or branding procedure strategies being used, and if the specific changes is to be made in the existing branding strategies, existing branding regulations, then what would be the impact of such new changes into a old or existing changes on the customer loyalty. If something a researcher is trying to find out the impact of such changes and specific or new changes to an existing changes into any sort of experiment or customers loyalty to find out the effect of, that's the casual research or exploratory research will be very helpful in it. So this is the basic difference of three main purposes of research. The first one is explanatory research, descriptive research, or explanatory research. Approach used is an unstructured approach will be used. In descriptive, there are a specific set of questions to be prepared, and accordingly it will be asked from the respondents during the data collection procedure. And explanatory research is a highly structured, where the specific designed set of questions is to be prepared, and accordingly the responses will be collected by the expertise team, and then the current issue will be resolved. Next one is conducted through asking questions during the descriptive research, and explanatory is testing or using hypothesis statements. Hypothesis is all about the assumption statements or declarative statements where the researcher used to test whether such statement would be true or false using the statistical methods, and it could be a descriptive, it could be inferential statistics. Next one is time. It's an early stage. Explanatory begins with the early stages of any of the decision making. Descriptive is the later stages of decision making when all the data collection has been done. You know the exact current situation or issues, and after that, after collecting the data, now you come up to a describing or giving a detailed description, and then you come up with a proper decision making process. Next is explanatory research is a later stages when everything is to be done, hypothesis, assumptions, statements has been done, now data collection has been done, statistical markets has been used, now the results has come up, and now the meaningful conclusion or decisions is to be prepared. Then that's called an explanatory research. Now we can come up with the next most important part of this block, that is the research method. In other words, research methods explain that how the researchers identify, collect, processes, analyze the data for his paper. So if a researcher is preparing an article, then what sort of you can say materials they used in the form of methods in terms of collection, in terms of processes, in terms of analyzing. So when a researcher analyzes the data, what sort of statistical methods is to be used for his papers? What sort of you can say methods of data collection is to be used? What sort of data processing methods is to be used for his article? And that exactly called the research methods, because research methods is all about collection, it's all about the process, it's all about the analyzing the data for a research paper or an article. It gives you a clear explanation what would be the procedures, what would be the materials, what would be the techniques is to be used so that they can easily examine the validity and the reliability of the findings, of the empirical findings of the paper or a study. So this is the way that how we can examine the research methods for a particular article, for a particular research paper. One of the main focus of this concept is to provide the scientific steps, the scientific stages, so that using that stages, the particular researcher is able to find out the solutions to a research problem. So this is how the research method, the term research method will be used in the sense of materials, you can say the procedures, and in the particular paper. In short, we can talk about the scientific papers like the journal articles, which always aims to report specific findings, a very accurate finding, which is a realistic findings. And in such scientific papers, we use the term method sections rather than we use the research methodology. So if we are preparing any scientific article or scientific paper using the realistic experiments, we use the term methods. What are the methods? What are the techniques has been used to collect the data, to fulfill the data analysis? What would be the procedure to collect the data, which presents all the techniques and procedures that a particular researcher used to identify, to collect, to process, measure, analyze the data and information for his or her research paper or journal article. That is exactly called the research method. So research method is all about the procedures, it's all about the techniques, it's all about the processes that a particular researchers uses to identify, to collect, to process, to measure, to analyze the data that will be collected from the various respondents or information for his or her paper or journal article. That's become research method. There are two main methods under the research method. The first one is the qualitative method, and the second one is the quantitative method. When it comes to the qualitative method, the data is not collected or processed numerically, because here we are not considered any numerical based data or any numerically where the numbers wouldn't be takes place, but mostly in the qualitative it is more subjective, it is more in words, it is more the literature supported the words, opinions, or the overall comprehension of their reality in a particular society. So it is inspired. Such a method, qualitative method, is inspired by the many philosophical personalities, and it always try to seek to inquire about the diverse facts of the human life. Let's take an example for cultures, beliefs, morality, you can say perception, customers' perception, satisfaction, you can say attitudes. So this is all about to describe in words with the supportive literatures or reviews by the famous philosophers' personalities. And of course, it is also a part of the curriculum of several disciplines. It could be arts, it could be social science, it could be psychology, it could be anthropology, it could be immunology, and many others areas. And some of the ways of collecting the qualitative data, it could be observation, it could be interviews, it could be questionnaires, any sort of documentary evidence or sources, it could be the focus group discussions, it could also be audio visual materials or any other part or any other equipments to be used for collecting the data. It could be the what we call it's recording or voice recording equipments that could be used in collecting the data, which could be recorded in words, and that could be used in your research papers or articles. So such methods, qualitative methods, will also be used when such sort of researches, such sort of issues in the particular area could be considered. Next one is quantitative method. The quantitative methods, where the quantitative research methods attach much more importance about on using up the numerical values when a particular researcher is trying to collect, measure, analyze, and interpret data and information. So researching with quantitative is always helps to measure, or you can say, the issues with numbers with using any of the statistical tools like averages, test, or you can say causal relationship or correlations between the two or more variables, how a particular meteorological department forecast the weather condition, that also the quantitative method will be used, how it will analyze the rainfall patterns or the trends, how the researchers, you can say, what we call, journalize the market trends. This method will be used because this method it applies when a particular researcher considered a very large population data, and it totally depends on the use of the statistical methods and the principles that a researcher is going to use in his study or her study. There are plenty of softwares or statistical softwares will be used to analyze the data related to a different perspective, different curriculums like the SPSS social package of social science data e-views are designed to analyze the data with the, in a quantitative terms. So there are different kinds of quantitative research. It could be experiments, it could be surveys and interviews, etc. And case studies as well. Next important section is what is the difference between the research method and the research methodology. So the research method is always focused on the techniques or the tools that will be used to collect the data. But research methodology is all about the conceptual framework or overall strategies that could be used in a research. A research method involves a specific procedure, stages, steps to obtain that information. But the research methodology, it deals with the literature support, it deals with the theoretical framework of, you can say, famous philosophers or personalities, views and opinions that what they have done in their existing studies. Next is and how a researcher could relate such studies with it in his new studies. Research methods determines the type of data which needs to be collected and analyzed. But research methodologies always guides the researcher that what would be the appropriate research methods to be used. Because after all, research methodology is a blueprint of the whole study, and that's why it guides the researcher and that what appropriate research method it's to be used for collecting the data. Examples could be surveys, experiments, interviews, observations. But in terms of quantitative, we can use a qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods. When we talk about the research method, describe it how what would be the process of data analysis and collection, but research methodology will provide a systematic approach at how you will conduct a research. Here, we just research method teach us or the researcher that what would be the processes to be used to collect the data and analyze the data. But research methodology provides a systematic approach at how to conduct a research for your study. Next is research method relates to practical aspects of the research, but research methodology is more theoretical aspect of research. A subset of research methodology will be used under the research methods, but the research methodology is encompasses or includes the entire research process, because after all, as I said, it is the blueprint of the research, and that's why what would be the research process to conduct a research study. It includes all the stages at one study. Next one is research method. It's specific to a particular research project or study, but the research methodology it applies across a different research projects and studies. Research method it's more constrained and tangible, but research methodology is more abstract and more conceptual, because after all you have to tell in a particular project, in a particular article, that what is to be what, how and when is to be done and why is to be done in what in a particular research study. It's why, it's when, why, how, and in what perspective the study is to be done and turned into a finishing stage. The research methodology guides the researcher. Research methods determines the reliability and the validity of the research findings. But research methodology it determines the overall validity and the soundness of the research, whether the research is giving up a meaningful conclusions of your study or not. That research methodology will guide to the research. Next, the most important concepts are the types of research. The first one is the fundamental research. Fundamental research is also called a basic or a theoretical research, and it's mainly designed to help the researcher to understand a better understand about the situation, about the event, about any certain phenomena in the world which is in the present, which is going in the present times. So it looks at how the things work out, but it does not tell you that it does not tell you how to find out or how to make the work better. It just gives a basic understanding about the event. That's called the fundamental research. And this research is a basic one which gives you a basic understanding about the topic, about the you can say event or any other situation or issues, so that you can broaden your knowledge, you can broaden your understanding, expand any scientific theories and explanation in it. So let's take an example. A company studies how different placements affect the product sales, and this study is just give you information, is just give you a knowledge, or the users can gain a knowledge that how it would affect the product sales if the particular organization you can say place a different product at one time. Next type is applied research. Applied research is mainly designed to identify the solutions to a specific problems or to find out the answers to a particular questions, and that's called an applied research. And this type of research we are actually using if we are facing any specific problem, what sort of solution we could able to find out to resolve that problem. And in that scenario, we use the applied research, because we are finding and applying that solution, which could be the best solution to resolve a problem or issue. So ultimately, it gives a knowledge to the researcher that could be applicable, that could be implementable in you can say to the organizations or to the individuals. But in applied research, there are two main types. The first one is technological applied research and scientific applied research. Technological applied research, this research looks for a possible ways or specific ways to improve the efficiencies in product processes and production. Because after all, in these three main parts, the technological advancement or innovation, which will plays a very significant role in this. Next one is scientific. Scientific applied research is always measures the certain variables so that they can predict the behavior, they can predict the outcomes and impact of any variable, of any factor. That becomes the scientific applied research. Let's take an example to understand this term more. A student working on a doctorate in education studies ways to increase the student involvement in the classroom. This research focused on a defined problem and a solution based. So the students who are working on a doctorate in education, they try to find out the ways to increase the student involvement in the classroom. So the problem is that increase, that means there is always a low student involvement. This is a problem, how it could increase that involvement in the classroom, even if it is doing, the student is pursuing doctorate in education studies. This is a problem, and how a researcher will find out the solution of a given problem. That in this case, if we apply any sort of a research, let's call an applied research. Next one is descriptive research. I already explained what would be the descriptive research. Is all about to describe or provide a description about the current scenario, about the, you can say, current characteristics of the population, considering the one variable of the sample population, and it's all about to present the facts, to acquire the fact, to gain the facts about the subject, and that's become the descriptive research. Next one is the correlational research. So the correlational research is to identify the strength and the direction, and how the relationship is to be built up, it's to be proved, it's to be evident between the two or more variables using the statistical tools, and whether there is a relationship between the education and age, whether there is a correlation between the demographic factors like age, gender, income, and education. So this is how, when a researchers try to correlate or try to find out the relationships between the variables or two or more or many other variables, that's become the correlation in research, because the major focus is to measure the variables, whether to determine if there is any relationship exists or not. Let's take an example. A study is to find out if there is a link between the number of hours a student sleeps and their academic performance. So whether we just try, a researcher is trying to correlate between the number of hours a student sleeps and whether it could influence their academic performance or not. And the researcher would collect the data on the sleep duration, that what would be the sleep duration of a student, and then say after that what would be the grades is to be it's to be seen whether it could improve, or you can say not, whether it could be positive or negatively related. And if it, the research is trying to correlate these two main variables, sleep duration and academic performance, then of course we can use the term and one of the type, that is correlational research. Next is explanatory research. This it is a process. This explanatory research is a process to explain why this phenomenon occurs. It's always trying to explain the reasons why. That's become the explanatory research. It could be to establish the cause and effect relationship between the variables, or to try to resolve the current issue, or by giving up the, you can say, the exact different perspectives to the readers. It always try to understand the casual factors behind the issue, behind the situation, so that they can come up with the meaningful outcome, the meaningful conclusion, which could be beneficial to the organization, to the society, and of course to the individuals. So the example that we could consider to understand this concept, a basic example, a study that tries to explain why students who sleep more get better grades. So it will explore how more sleep leads to a better cognitive function as a behavior patterns we could see, and in turn whether it improves the performance or not. So the cause and effect relationship is to establish, and we try to find out the answer why it occurs. Then it becomes the explanatory reason, because explanatory reason is all about giving the reasons about a particular event, why this such event could occur. Next one is the qualitative research. So the next one is the qualitative research. I already explained what is qualitative. The qualitative deals with a non-numerical data, it could be opinions, it could be literature support research. It's all about description about to obtain the meanings and the feelings involved in the situation. So that's called a qualitative. It could be the various methods could be used in qualitative, could be the focus group discussion, surveys could be conducted, participation, respondent participation, their comments, observation, interviews, etc. But let's take an example to understand this concept. A marketing organization presents a new commercial to a focus groups. So before air it or telecast into a public, or while to receive the feedback, the company collects a non-numerical data. We're just asking for the respondents of the public to share your feedback, to share your opinions, to make the decision whether to telecast at the same time or not. So that's called a qualitative decision. So before you're making any decision, it could be better to get the feedback, to get the opinions and views, whether to telecast a new commercial program, you can say, or not. To such focus groups participate, to first focus groups or public. So this is how qualitative research is to be conducted, which is more, you can say, subjective, a more literature based. Next one is quantitative research. Totally depends on the numerical data. We always talk about the statistics. If we're using statistics, any of the statistical tools like averages, measures of dispersion, correlation, regression, index number, we are talking about quantitative research, because such research is trying to investigate the specific question like who, what, where, and when. So when such answers is to be given by the researcher after collecting the responses from the respondent, such results is to be represented in the form of diagrams or graphs. And the various types of research could be used under the quantitative, could be the survey research, descriptive research, curational research, etc. Let's take an example. A car manufacturer compares the number of sales of the red sedans compared to the white sedans. The research uses an objective data, and the sales figures for red and white sedan accordingly what would be the sales figure, and accordingly the researcher would draw conclusions from it, and that becomes a quantitative research. So it's all about a comparative study about the sales of red and the white sedans. So it's all about the objective based data with the sales figures is to be considered, and accordingly the researcher will give a meaningful conclusions on it. So that's become quantitative research. Next one is deductive research. Deductive research is all about testing a theory. It is an opposite version of the inductive research, and it always moves from broad to specific concerns. So research in this particular research, the hypothesis testing would be definitely works out. So here in this research, researchers chooses a hypothesis statement. It could be declarative statement, it could be any assumptive statement that the market that you can say a company products are not working in this market. So this is a hypothesis statement has been conducted. Now researchers try to test it accuracy, that whether the statement is true or not through observation, through experimental, through any survey they can use, and accordingly they can come to the result. And that's become a deductive research. So researcher observed 12 international corporations enacted in-house carbon emission standards in the same year. They use deductive research to compare the global emission levels before and after the measures were detected. So this is how the deductive research is to be done. It's all about the hypothetical statement has been made and prepared, and accordingly using a deductive, it will be before and after the you can say the measures is to be conducted. Next one is inductive research. Inductive research is called about theory building research. I already told its main purpose to build up or to develop a new theory about the process, about the phenomenon. That's become the inductive research. It's all about the first step is to set up a theory generation, then it needs to additional research, additional information, like deductive research is to be conducted so that the hypothesis statements could be tested to test its adequacy, whether it is accurate or not, whether it's true or false. That to be used in inductive research to develop a theory about any process, about any phenomenon, event, etc. Let's take an example. Researchers observed that the worldwide emissions decline. So, based on the deductive, they have conducted such conclusion. The researchers observed that the worldwide emissions declined when 12 international corporations enacted in-house carbon emission standards in the same year. The researcher theorized that the worldwide emissions can be reduced significantly if international corporations impose in-house emission standards. That means the researchers have theorized that this particular theory could be applied in a real scenario which is based on the deductive research. So that's because deductive is more broad to the specific. So here, this inductive is more about to develop a new theory, and such theory which has been made by the researcher based on the concern or issue or any of the phenomenon. And the last type is the social research. Social research is all about to study the human society and the social relationships to understand or to better understand and predict what could be the social phenomena exist using the various methods like surveys, interviews, observation, etc. For example, to understand the public perceptions of the climate change. So a researcher might conduct a survey to gather the people perceptions or belief so that such perceptions and beliefs could help the researcher to prepare the strategies for the public awareness campaigns or programs. And that's becomes a social research. The next one is the on the next section, or one of the important section is business research. Business research is a systematic process of how a researcher is to collect the data analyzed the data, interpreted the data to resolve the business issues and concern, and accordingly, the researcher could prepare a strategic decisions. And it involves various areas of field like market research, financial analysis, consumer behavior, quantitative analysis, etc. And one of the major goal of such research is to provide a deep insight which could help the business organizations to improve their performances, to identify the opportunities and reduce the business or financial or any other risks. Scope of business research. The first one is the market research. Market research is always all about collect and analyze data about the market conditions, customers' preferences, their buying behavior, etc. So here in this particular scope category, the skilled market research company specialize in these areas. Next one is the product research. Product research focus is focused to evaluate the feasibility, the design, the performance of the new products or services. It's all about the testing the product concept, assess the market demand, and then accordingly gather the customers' feedback. Financial research. Financial research is all about to analyze the financial data so that the particular researcher can easily evaluate the financial health of the company or business. So it's all about to forecast to or to plan about the company profitability and sustainability, and accordingly they could work to improve such figures or financial figures. Consumer research. Consumer research is aims to understand the consumer behavior, their preferences, their satisfaction levels. It also helps the business to tailor their products and services so that they can meet up the customer's expectation. Next one is the quantitative analysis. The quantitative analysis involves to study the competitors so that they can better understand their strategies, their strength, their weakness, and their threats as well. So it also helps the businesses so that they can to develop the strategies to gain a competitive advantage in the market. Next one is the operational research. Operational research focuses on improving the business processes and operation. It's not only analyze the workflows but also to identify the inefficiencies or accurate efficiency, and accordingly they could implement solutions so that to increase the productivity in the operational you can say companies or logistic companies or operational companies. And in this way, the researcher could reach out across different domains of the organizations. Next one is the significance or importance of business research. It informs decision making. While the researcher is doing a depth study, it will help the business to prepare a better decisions regarding marketing, product development, and operations. Opportunity identification also helps to identify the opportunities in the market, in the new market. It will open up a new market opportunities and able to understand the emerging trends of the market so that they can understand the new opportunities that exist in the market. Next one is the risk mitigation. Research always allow to identify the potential risks, the potential issues or concern that the business could immediately focus on such issues and try to come up with the possible ways and minimize the potential losses in it. Customers understanding. Business can gain a deep understanding of customers' needs, behavior, preferences, and so on. Competitive advantage. Staying informed about the market conditions, competitors, what would be the industry changes, which always enables the organizations and company to adapt something new and maintain their competitive image. Next one is innovation. Research can identify the gaps in the market or any areas where new products and services are worked out so that it will lead to an innovation in such products and services in the market. Now we can come up with the most important part, that is the role of research in important areas. The first one is marketing. So of course it is a process or a set of processes which automatically correlate the buyers and the end users to the marketer through the information. And that information which always defines to identify the market opportunities and problems in order to generate, refine, and evaluate the market actions and keep up the marketing performances. Next one is production. Research always make it possible for a business to decide what to produce, how to produce, when to produce, and for whom to produce. So it gives a detailed understanding about these aspects, and accordingly, the research tools are to be used. Next one is strategy making. Research can inform and helps the business organization to formulate the business strategies, and it could be done through the strategic planning. And it could it is it and research planning could be done through following the business research processes in order to understand the customer preferences, what the sort of further developments in the product, what sort of features could be add on that makes a sense in it. Next one is the government. Research lays a foundation for all the government policies and procedures in an economic system. Let's take an example to understand. Research is utilized for developing the union finance and railway budget annually. So research is also employed for the economic planning of the we can say country, and it is very important that ideal utilization of resources for the growth and development of the country could be used. Healthcare, of course, research is also leads to new treatment, diagnostic tools, preventive measures that help and improve the health outcomes and prolong lives. In fact, now a new treatment has been, you can say, implemented in the healthcare industry to cure from AIDS or STD. Next one is business. Research is always helps the businesses to in order to understand the markets and develop a new products and services. They can improve the operation, makes informed decisions for successes. Sustainability. Research is also essential for developing a sustainable energy solutions which could lead to a climate change and finding the ways so that the environment could sustain and protect. Advertising effectiveness, organizations use the research to ascertain the success of the advertising campaigns programs. For example, an auto manufacturer may wish to know what percentage of people saw its most recent TV commercial. Then company may find more people become more aware of its advertising, which are longer run on TVs or any other OTT platforms. So this is how the organizations would sustain the success of their advertising campaigns, their advertisements, even that other movies you can talk about in the theater. This is how the research is to be done. Network systems and services distributing computing. The research team is always being involved in this area to define what's going on in the future of the internet as a communication infrastructure as well commuting infrastructure in a broad sense. And the last one is risk management. In order to understand the current conditions, it could lead to a lower risk. And research provides the parameters that how the business can prosper and manage the risk. Researching trends, market condition, which always helps out the organizations to understand the need for increased insurance, alternative shipping, and transportation requirements or any other need to access and sell assets. Definitely it is important to research on the risk parameters and accordingly they can come up with a meaningful decisions. Next is research process. The research process involves several key stages. It could be identify the problem, then define the research questions, then review the existing literature to understand the current knowledge, then develop a research design, including what would be the samples to be studied, what would be the approaches to be used, what would be the methods to be research methods to be used, then collect the data, then analyze the data, then finally write up a report to share the findings to the readers or the public. So these stages are the sequence wise. Step by step, this process will be followed in research studies, and it refers to an independent and forming a cyclical or iterative process. So this is a diagram of overall research process. You need to identify the problems, you evaluate the literature, you create the hypothesis, you design the research that describe the population, collect the data, analyze the data, and then once you fulfill all the stages, then you come up at the end stage to write a report to share your findings to the readers or public. So let's have an overview. Identify the problem. You need to identify the research problem. It could be in the society itself, or it could be any other areas, and set up the objectives and choose the techniques. So there are so many approaches to gain a more better understanding about the topic and to get insight into a topic which is very important to identify the problems in that area, in that perspective. So memory survey could be done, a case studies could be conducted, interviews could be held with a small group of people, observation survey could be done to identify the topics. Evaluate the literature. It is very important to examine the existing literature which is relevant to your current knowledge of your study. So once the problem has been found, the researcher needs to find out more about the problem which is existed, you can say, in the literatures. So this is the problem zone background in order to understand how the investors will, you can say, find out the existing literature of the current researches, topics, or the current knowledge or study, how and what would be the existing investigator, how they have conducted the previous researches, how they concluded the results and finding. That is very important to understand in evaluating the literature and which could be relevant to your research problem. Create hypotheses as you just make up the assumptions related to the facts, related to the objectives that the researcher has set up in his study, and accordingly just assume the statements and build up a statement which is relevant to your research objectives. Next one is research design. It is a plan to achieve objectives, how a researcher could achieve objectives, how they can answer the research question. Research design is that plan to answer and achieve, is a way to achieve the objective. It gives an outline of how you will get the relevant information, what sort of methods are to be prepared, and how the hypothesis is to be conducted, how the research questions is to be answered, and gives a brief overview about the decision making process. So it's all about research designers' major focus is to minimize the time, money, and effort which is required for a researcher to reach out a meaningful evidence. So this plan is categorized in three main parts: exploration and surveys, experiments, data analysis, and observation. Describe the population. You can talk about the community. You can talk about any geographical areas. You can consider it about any ethnic groups. And you need to specialize and describe what sort of population you need to include for your study. Then data collection, these are the methods: experiment, questionnaire, observation, interview could be used. You can also use the literature review, official or unofficial reports as well. And the researcher can also use the library resources as well. Then data analyze, just the data is to be coded and accordingly analyzed using the statistical tools, and accordingly whatever the findings are to come out, that to be reviewed and reported. It could be done through diagrams or tables, it could be graphs as well. Then the last stage is report writing. You have to lay out the report writing, what sort of list of tables and graphs and charts to be included. Then start up with the introduction, then what will be the summary of your findings of your study. It's all about to summarize your findings. Then principal report, the main body of the report, and classified into sections so that it would be easier to understand for the readers. And at the last, you need to conclude your findings, which is the main part of your study, which leads to a final results. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening this lecture. I will come up to a more interesting and important topics in the upcoming sessions. Until time, thank you and namaste to all.